What's up, everyone? Vinny Musso from Musso Athletics here for day 11 of our 30 days of force. So we spent the first 10 days talking about force absorption. So using our letter V as our example for kind of explaining force. We talked about that first arm of the V, that downward sloping arm that goes down towards the ground for the first 10 days. Now we're going to switch it up, and for these next 10 days, we're going to talk about force redirection. Okay, so if we look at that V again, we're talking about that bottom part of the V. Okay, so this is a very often overlooked part of force training. I think a lot of people, even though force absorption can be overlooked, I think there's a lot of people who have heard of, eccentric training and things along those lines. And obviously a lot of people know about the force production part of training. We know about plyometrics, heavy lifting, things like that. But a lot of the times that bottom part, that transitional phase between our force absorption and our force production often gets overlooked. And if we are overlooking it, then we're definitely selling either ourselves short in our own training or selling a client short in what we're training them for, whether it's athletic performance, if we're training someone whose goal is to kind of lift heavier weights, this also can be a very effective method helping them achieve their goals. Okay. So going back to our V example, that letter V, we've talked about the importance of force absorption because again, we're not going to somehow be in a position where we cut off half of this first arm of the V, so we're not going to only be able to absorb say this much force and then be able to produce this much. Okay, you're not going to have a situation where your V is asymmetrical. For the most part, both arms of your V are going to be equal. So this first arm is going to equal the second arm. Problem is, if we ignore force redirection training, then what happens is this V, which should be a nice sharp V with a very quick transition down here at the middle, can turn into something like that. Okay, so if we see the example that I just drew compared to the first V, so that first V, and we have a sharp turn at the bottom there, both sides pretty much equal. Okay, if we ignore our redirection training, what happens is instead of that nice sharp transition we get at the bottom there, we still get our steep force absorption arm of that V, but instead of a quick sharp change back into our force production, now we kind of lag here at the bottom before we go back up. So essentially, that second arm of the V has been broken up into a broken arm. So now instead of a nice straight line going up, we have it broken into two parts. Okay? So that is the importance of our force redirection training. Okay? If we spent time working on force absorption, working on teaching our body again to absorb force, high amounts of force and at a high velocity. If we ignore our force redirection training, then we're not going to be able to efficiently transition from that absorption to the production. We're definitely going to be selling ourselves short and not getting our full potential. And to kind of put this into more of an analogy, or kind of real life examples. Think of, if you're an athlete, think of something that you've done, whether you're going to jump, and then after you kind of absorb, it almost feels like you're jumping out of quicksand. Like it almost feels like you're jumping out in slow motion. You kind of get to that bottom part, getting ready to jump up, but instead of jumping up nice and quick, it almost feels like it's taking you a long time to get up into that jump. This could also be if you've ever gone to jump, and at the bottom of that jump, you almost feel like your legs kind of give out. So you absorb that force, but then right as you go to switch up, whether it's your ankles or your knees or your hips, something just kind of feels like it gives and just doesn't want to work properly. So if you've experienced that, or you have an athlete or a client who's kind of described something like that to you, that should turn the light bulb on in your head that this person would definitely benefit from emphasizing some force redirection. Okay, so that is the importance of focusing on our force redirection. It's that quick transition that allows us to efficiently transfer our absorbed force into produced force. So if we don't have an efficient transition, And then instead of that nice sharp V, we kind of get that broken up V where we're not, again, reaching our full potential of how much force that we can produce. Okay, so we definitely want to focus on this type of training to get the most out of our bodies. And over the next 10 days, we'll be talking about different methods of training. Really 3 methods that we're going to focus on. So tomorrow's video will go into isometrics. So we talked about eccentrics in the first 10 days, and we're going to use that bicep curl as an example. So for those of you who haven't seen the video yet, I suggest going back, watching the first 10 days to get caught up. It's going to help you understand everything. But if you remember that bicep curl example, we've talked about eccentric force or eccentric muscle contraction. So if I look at a bicep curl, when I'm coming down from that bicep curl, my bicep is elongating. Okay, so it's elongating, but my muscles are still firing. Okay, if they weren't firing, then that dumbbell I'm holding would just plop down to the ground. So when I'm lowering that dumbbell back to the start of a bicep curl, that's eccentric muscle contraction of the biceps, because the bicep is lengthening, but it's firing. Okay. Our isometrics are when our muscle is firing but not moving. So let's say we take that same dumbbell, but now instead of moving it through range of motion, we pick a point and we just stop there and hold it. Okay, so my muscle is firing. If it wasn't firing, my arm would just plop down. Okay, so my muscle's firing, but it's not moving because I'm just holding that dumbbell right in space. Okay, so that's the first type of training method that we're going to talk about tomorrow. We'll go into more detail and show some different examples of different isometric exercises, but we'll talk about the importance of isometrics and what that does, and how it helps in our overall force training. Okay, our second method is going to be oscillations. So oscillations kind of are just what they sound like. It's kind of going through a repetitive movement, kind of up and down or side to side. But we're going to go into detail about more specifics about that. To kind of give you a brief preview of it, it's kind of like the analogy of going from, we talk about cars, how fast they can go from like 0 to 60. That's kind of the same concept. It's how quickly can your body go from nothing to really fast to really explosive. Okay, so we'll talk about that with our oscillations, and then our redirections are just what they sound like. They're exercises. And it's a technique where we are basically just going through our force absorption to our force production, but again, really emphasizing that last, or that bottom part of the V, so that quick transition from our absorption to our production. Okay, and we'll show some exercises on how to train with that type of method, our redirection method. Okay, so I'll do it for today's video. Again, just wanted to kind of introduce our next 10 days, what we're going to be talking about, and again, going over the importance of force redirection training. To put it into simple terms, we want to have a nice sharp V. We don't want that V broken up into a broken arm, because we're not going to be able to produce as much force as our body is fully capable of. All right. So be sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, share the video, and if you haven't yet, take a look at Absorption Athletics on Instagram for more training content. See you tomorrow.